We are talking with Carteret County Sheriff Asa Buck in light of the announcement earlier today related to the charging for murder of Ray Willis from Atlantic for the murder of Phil and David Fulcher of Atlantic. The murders took place August of last year. So if you can, a little background on this, if you would.
Well, I can speak briefly about it. I can't go into any of the details. We did have a news conference this morning announcing the arrest of David Ray Willis, who is 57 years old and was living in Atlantic when we initially responded to the scene back in August of 2022 and discovered that we had a double homicide. Mm-hmm. Our detectives began an investigation. And, of course, the first thing to do that day was to process the crime scene. And we were assisted by the State Bureau of Investigation and the Onslow County Sheriff's Office Crime Scene Unit. And that effort collected significant evidence for our case, including DNA, showing all the details about that. Not long into our investigation, we began to focus in on Mr. Willis. And exactly a year ago today, we actually executed a search warrant at David Ray Willis's residence in Atlantic, and we seized a number of items of evidence, including the cell phone, digital storage device, and we were able to search those devices and determine that he was in possession of child pornography. He was arrested the following day, and he's been in our jail ever since. Our detectives continued to compile all the information that we could, mountains of digital evidence that they've had to go through, and we've been assisted by other agencies and personnel that have assisted us in that effort, including the SBI, Homeland Security Investigations, the Carolina Beach Police Department. And, it's taken time to go through all of that information and meticulously build a case, to find the evidence, build a case against David Ray Willis. And we believe that we have sufficient evidence that will prove him guilty and responsible for these murders.
I know that there was a pressure. I have to even admit that I made several calls trying to see how the case was progressing, and you very, very coyly shutted me aside. And I know that you've received volumes of concerns and criticisms, yes, even criticisms and doubts. What was the significance of this? It is interesting, though, that this is a sort of thing that really, you used the word a moment ago, meticulous, that takes, you have to pay close attention to the details because, quite frankly, your efforts are greatly influenced, or your efforts influence the eventual outcome of a trial. That's something that I think many of us take for granted. We watch criminal programs or crime stories on TV. We hear about these successful conclusions, but I think that many times we fail to understand the amount of time that really does take to bring a case to court.
Yeah, that's right. And when you're going to go and charge someone with murder, that's not the type of thing that you do on shaky evidence or willy-nilly. Right. And it does take time to put these cases together. And every case is different. Sometimes cases might not take this long to bring together. If you have a different set of circumstances and facts and witnesses and any number of different aspects, obviously some cases are closed much sooner, and some cases take much longer, and some cases the charges are never brought. Anytime, not just the made-up TV shows, but anytime you watch you see one of these real-world cases that's played out on television, and they show you the successful conclusion. Those are the cases that were solved.
Right.
You don't see a whole lot about all the cases that were never charged.
Right.
And, unfortunately, a lot of these cases do go uncharged. And it's not that no one, put in any effort to do it. It's just that sometimes you have to have the evidence in order to charge someone. The other thing is, we only get one crack at it. If you go and charge somebody too soon or with not enough evidence, and then they go down to the courtroom, and if a jury finds them not guilty, then they're scot-free for the rest of their lives. You could have additional evidence that may come up after the fact, and have protections against double jeopardy, and you can't try the person a second time. So we've got to be right. But, in some instances, time is on our side. That's why we have to make sure that we don't rush. And I understand that the public always wants information and deserves information. And we have to balance that with protecting our case. And we were very tight with information on this case, and we still are, even though we've brought charges. The investigation still continues, and we still have a case to prosecute. And so this is not done until the case is adjudicated in court. And so the least little thing that slips out could hinder our case. And so that's why we always have to be very tight with information while we're still investigating a matter. And I do understand that creates a sense of frustration, oftentimes on family and friends of victims, as well as with the general public. And believe me, we all understand that. And nobody wants to give the public information more than we do. But we have to balance that with, our first objective and our first mission is to solve these cases and to get justice for our victims and the survivors. I
did note that in your press conference today, you did have a representative or representatives of the Fulcher family there. So you have, I'm assuming, without sharing any more details than what you're sharing with us, you've stayed in close contact with the Fulcher family.
Yeah.
That's a big issue too, because not only are you trying to solve the crime, but at the same time you're communicating with the family, the survivors, and I would assume you're trying to give them some sense of comfort while at the same time not providing them with too much information.
Yes, exactly. You said that in a nutshell. And like I said, we want to be able to provide as much information as we can, even to our the families and the relatives. But sometimes we don't want to burden them with too much information.
Right.
Because here again, even if somebody in a family says something to someone, if it's information that we need to protect,
right?
Certainly they wouldn't say it with any intent to harm the case. But as I said, sometimes the least little thing, if it gets out and goes around, it could hinder our investigation.
It sounds to me like also a very sensitive balancing case, because at the same time, you're trying to maintain a sense of confidence for the family that there will be a conclusion, but at the same time, you can't overpromise.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one thing I learned as a deputy sheriff many years ago. I never left anybody with a false sense of hope or making empty promises. Just speaking for myself as a deputy, I always said that I would do my best. And that's kind of how we handle things nowadays. We're going to try, we're going to do our very best to bring a case to a conclusion and a resolution, but we don't make empty promises.
I think this is an important conversation for the audience to recognize, because to our earlier comment, everybody sees the initiation of the crime on TV, and then 30 minutes later, maybe an hour later, hour and a half later, it's come to a successful conclusion. That hour of airtime actually transfers into months, maybe even years of investigative time.
Yes, absolutely. And generally you're not talking about one or two or even a handful of people, just right. With this and most of the homicides we've investigated in the past, we've had a lot of people assisting us.
Okay.
We collect evidence. We don't analyze all the evidence. We have to send things to the state crime lab. And initially in the investigation, they actually did a rush on some of the evidence. They moved us right to the head of the line due to the circumstances of the case. But they weren't able to do that with every piece of evidence that we submitted after the fact. So, a lot of this stuff we've had to wait for. It takes time to be analyzed. All of the electronic and digital information that we've had to preserve and send search warrants for and obtain, and to go through that information, and those who have helped us with that. So it takes time to go through everything, and then to build a case and make a picture, and working with our district attorney's office and laying everything out to where the DA's office feels that they have sufficient evidence to bring a successful prosecution. That takes a period of time. it seems like it's been a long time. I certainly feel that way, like everyone else. But a lot of these cases, do and in this case could have taken longer. I'm just glad that we got to the point that we were able to develop sufficient evidence to bring the charges against David Ray Willis and to hold him accountable for these murders.